They say desire doesn't always knock with fanfare. Sometimes it slips in through the back door, wearing the face of someone you've known forever, the one who shares your bloodline in a tangled family tree, who pulls up a chair at holidays, who calls your spouse cousin without a second thought. It's the kind of pull that shouldn't exist, the kind that whispers your name in the dead of night when you're supposed to be dreaming of fidelity. I wish I could wrap this tale in a bow of redemption, swear to you that I turned back at the edge, clutched my wedding band like a shield against the tide. But that would be a fairy tale, and this isn't one. The raw fact is, I tumbled over that cliff, and the scars from the fall, they're still fresh, teaching me lessons I never asked for. It unfolded so gently at first, like a summer breeze carrying the scent of jasmine through open windows. My husband's cousin's son, Ethan, showed up for a month-long visit, escaping the grind of his final college year in our quiet seaside cottage on the edge of a foggy bay. He was 23, with that easy grin that lit up rooms without trying, polite in a way that felt genuine, not rehearsed. The sort of young man who's read more books than most twice his age, yet still carries a spark of wonder in his eyes, making you feel like your words matter, like you're not just background noise in your own life. Heaven knows I hadn't felt that pull of attention in ages. Our home hugged the coastline, where salt air mingled with the bloom of wild roses climbing the porch rails, and the waves crashed like a lullaby most nights. But inside these weathered walls, a chill had settled long ago. Mark, my husband of 15 years, had drifted into his own orbit. It wasn't fireworks and fury that eroded us, no slammed doors or hurled accusations. It was subtler, a gradual fade, like ink bleeding into parchment until the words blur. He'd glance right through me during breakfast, his mind already miles away in boardrooms and deadlines. I'd catch myself in the hallway mirror, adjusting a necklace he hadn't complimented in seasons, wondering if the woman staring back was still worth the effort. So when Ethan arrived, suitcase in hand and stories spilling out like confetti, I brushed off the warmth blooming in my chest. It was just kindness, I reasoned. Family being family. Nothing more. But lies we tell ourselves are the softest traps, aren't they? They lure you in with promises of safety, then snap shut when you're not looking. Betrayal, I've learned, rarely arrives with trumpets. It tiptoes disguised as empathy, a shared laugh over morning coffee, a brush of fingers that lingers one heartbeat too long. Before you can map the exit, you're entangled, threads of what if weaving tighter than you ever intended. I could have halted it then, drawn a firm line in the sand of our sun-dappled living room. But I didn't, and that choice? It's the ghost that haunts me still. This is the confession I've locked away, shared with no soul. Not my sister over wine-fueled calls, not the journal pages that gather dust, not even the reflection that accuses me each dawn. If you've ever teetered on that precipice, where loyalty frays and longing sharpens its claws, where the ache of being overlooked makes forbidden fruit taste like salvation, then lean in. Let me unravel it for you. Because this isn't merely a chronicle of missteps. It's a mirror to the voids we all harbor, the ones that beg to be filled no matter the cost. And perhaps, in the telling, you'll glimpse your own shadows, and forgive us both. Mark was elbow deep in a spreadsheet when Ethan's tires crunched over the gravel drive. He barely lifted his head from the laptop glow in his study, muttering something about settling in wherever. No handshake, no welcoming pat on the back, just the hum of his fan and the click of keys. So I played host, leading Ethan up the creaky stairs to the attic room with its slanted ceilings and view of the restless sea. I poured him iced tea from the pitcher sweating on the counter, inquired about his classes, his part-time gig at a bookstore, the dreams he chased like fireflies in the dusk. He replied with substance, eyes meeting mine steadily, not darting to his phone like Mark's always did. It was disorienting how his presence stirred the air, chasing out the staleness that had seeped into the floorboards. Ethan moved through the world with a quiet gravity, not arrogant, but attuned, like he cataloged the world's small beauties, the way the light fractured through seashell wind chimes, or how I'd swapped my usual chamomile for bold black brew that week. He was young, yes, but layered, the kind who'd pause to watch a heron stalk the tide pools, pondering life's undercurrents. That initial stretch of days, I dismissed his attentiveness as good manners, the polish of youth. Yet even then, a subtle current hummed beneath our exchanges, the way he'd hover in the doorway while I chopped herbs for supper, offering to grate the cheese or stir the pot, his laughter folding into mine over a botched recipe. Mark? He was a phantom, vanishing into dawn commutes and evening haze of exhaustion, collapsing into the armchair with remote in hand, world narrowed to flickering screens. Our dialogues had withered to logistics. Pass the salt, or don't forget the dry cleaning. Once, I'd been the spark, twirling through these rooms to indie playlists, sketching charcoal portraits of driftwood on rainy afternoons, pulling Mark into spontaneous beach walks where we'd chase bioluminescent waves. But erosion is patient. It carves canyons from steady drips. Now I navigated days like a ghost in my own skin. Rise, brew, tidy, repeat, a hollow echo of the woman who'd once chased sunsets without apology. Ethan shattered that monotony without fanfare. He coaxed stories from me over porch swings at twilight when the sky bled peach and indigo over the bay. One evening, as gulls wheeled overhead and the air thickened with brine, I probed deeper. How was he faring truly? He exhaled, leaning against the rail, confessing the weight of uncertainty, professors who droned like distant thunder, friendships fraying under ambition's strain, nights staring at cracked ceilings, wondering if adulthood was just a prettier cage. His vulnerability mirrored mine so sharply it stole my breath. I knew that drift, that sensation of orbiting a life that no longer fit. It wasn't seduction in the candlelit sense, no winks or whispers. It was resonance, a bridge thrown across the chasm of isolation, fragile but fervent. I recall that instant vividly, his gaze holding mine under the lantern's amber haze, unblinking, as if mapping constellations in my irises. My pulse quickened, a forbidden drumbeat. I could have shattered it with a joke, a shift in topic. Instead, I held the silence, letting it bloom. For the first time in an eternity, I wasn't translucent. I was etched in light. Mark never queried the contours of my days. Did the gallery downtown inspire, or did the novel I'd cracked at lunch twist like he imagined? Ethan did, his curiosity a balm on parched ground. Mark overlooked the shadows under my eyes from restless nights. Ethan brewed an extra mug, sliding it across the counter with a soft, rough one. Mark hadn't murmured goodnight in moons. Ethan caught me thumbing through photo albums in the dim parlor at midnight, pausing to trace a finger over faded prints, asking what memory lingered there. It remained platonic, a delicate dance on the periphery of peril. Yet peril it was, laced with the thrill of being beheld, not skimmed, not catalogued, but truly witnessed. In retrospect, that porch confessional marked the genesis, not the fevered culmination, nor the bitter wake. No, it commenced in that suspended breath, when a pledged wife and her kinskin locked eyes across unspoken yearnings, and neither averted first. It ignited on a sweltering midday, the sort where heat shimmers off the asphalt like a mirage and the world lulls in languid haze. I'd trekked back from the market, canvas totes sagging with heirloom tomatoes and crusty loaves, straps biting into my palms. Mark was adrift in meetings, as per usual. Aid from him was a relic of another era. But Ethan materialized on the porch steps, bounding down to relieve me, his touch light as he hefted the load, a grin breaking like dawn over his features. Not obligatory courtesy, but genuine delight as if my return anchored his afternoon. In the galley kitchen, with its shiplap walls and herb bundles dangling from hooks, I unpacked amid the scent of sun-ripened fruit. He lingered, volunteering to shelve the spices, nestle jars in the pantry. Was it the humidity pressing close or the unhurried rhythm of our movements? The space contracted, elbows grazing, hips brushing in the narrow aisle as we reached for the same upper cabinet, dissolving into shared chuckles at our clumsy choreography. Then, amid the mirth, he quipped something wry about my chef's precision, turning the counter into a battlefield. It wrenched a guffaw from me, unbidden and full-throated, the sort that rattles dust from your ribs, dormant for seasons untold. He pivoted, gaze settling, not as kin appraising an elder, but as one soul beholding another, raw and unveiled. It wasn't brazen scrutiny, merely a pause pregnant with possibility, the atmosphere thickening like fog rolling in from the bay. I feigned absorption in stacking jars, pulse thrumming against my temples, aware of his stillness, the absence of his hands in motion. That eve, tranquility blanketed the cottage. Mark slumbered on his side of, "Then, unbidden, this life, it underserves you." Uttered softly, as if snatched from thought's periphery, it struck like a rogue wave, chest constricting. Response eluded. I inclined my head, vision blurring, sealing the torrent behind gritted teeth. That gloaming, I decanted crimson from a cellar bottle, not revelry's toast, but anesthetic for the gnaw within. Ethan reclined on the veranda glider, neck craned to the vaulted indigo, stars pricking like distant lanterns. The breeze lapped gentle, enveloping in nocturnal embrace. I proffered the stemware. Surprise flickered in his thanks, a tentative curve to his mouth. Words were scant. We perched in tandem, night's chorus, crickets trill, distant buoys toll, our sole companions. Celestial sprawl dwarfed the cottage's confines. My existence contracted to chores and chasms. This exhaled vitality, a nexus of nascent and nadir. He angled toward me, regard palpable ere visual. That gaze anew, laden with interrogatives and inevitability. Proximity sharpened, breaths mingling, auras brushing. I inclined fractionally, towing the brink without breach, desire a siren call. Then, shrill intrusion, my device trilling from within. Mark's moniker illuminated the void. Frost reclaimed me. I responded, timbre even, core in tumult. Inquiry banal. Recall the roofer from Morrow's Mend? Affirmation dispatched, line severed, I resettled in hush. Ethan resumed stargazing, mute. We both fathomed the precipice skirted, and grimmer its recurrence loomed inexorable. I catechized my resolve. Mere sentiment, reins intact, fortitude sufficient to rein it. Fallacy. Surrender had commenced. It crested on a weekday dawn, Mark departing pre-light for a coastal seminar, 3 days absence. His farewell, lips grazing temple, perfunctory as breath, gaze averted, fervor extinct, duty's echo. By eventide, solitude amplified, thoughts reverberating in hollows, voids I'd entombed, hungers starved. Repose evaded. The berth sprawled vast, linens chill as autumn's promise. I rose, swathing in velvet wrap, descending to the galley for chamomile's hush. Footfalls answered. Ethan tousled from slumber, bare torso, palm-kneading nape as if dispelling reverie. Sleepless? He rasped, timbre gravel rough. Affirmation mirrored. Insomnia's grip universal. He navigated my orbit, foraging hydration from the chill box. Verbiage sparse, necessity absent, yet atmosphere altered, taut as bowstring, gravid with the ineffable. I pivoted to the stove's flame, feigning focus, yet his scrutiny seared. You holding up? Query gentle, probing. Not evaded scrutiny. Proximity intensified. No masks needed here, he added, and fracture yielded. Visage lifted, beholding his candor, unbarred, attuned, incarnate, I unraveled. Torrent commenced subdued, escalating to frayed honesty. Invisibility's sting, the void of caress and cherishing, exhaustion from feigning flourish amid fracture. He absorbed, unyielding, no palliatives proffered, merely proximate, tangible, requisite. You're vivid to me, he breathed, and dam breached. The union? Impulsive, uncharted. Inclination bridged the gulf. Reciprocity ignited. Tender inception, surging to fervor's flood. Loneliness incarnate. Voiceless epochs erupting in clasp and cadence. Wrapper yielded to shoulders curve. Palms anchored hips. Cessation? Unthinkable. No antecedents, no tomorrows, solely that veil of midnight, rapacity sated, the vertigo of reclamation in ardent abandon. The galley claimed us, backs to butcher block, refrigerators murmur and lone bulbs halo our witnesses. Climax ebbed. He loomed, respirations ragged, optics wide with wonder laced in trepidation. I cinched the wrap, retreating to stool's perch, ignominy crashing tidal, submersing swift. Sobs surfaced, muted, then maelstrom from abyssal reservoirs presumed barren. Ethan transfixed, inert, quandary etching his frame. I, too, adrift in disarray. In that crux, identity dissolved. No consort, no essence, merely a vessel, parched for succor, grasping the proffered vein. Unforgivable enacted. Yet sequelae? Labyrinthine torment. Dawn reshaped the cottage, not clamor, not disarray, but encumbrance. Ethan materialized as I ground beans, salutation subdued. Aversion marked him, no customary beam, scrutiny earthbound. Normalcy essayed, brew extended, inquiry on repose. Curt nod, vessel claimed egress. That brevity lacerated unduly. Erstwhile warmth curdled to frigidity, contrition's fog pervading passages. Platitudes invoked, distancing requisite, gravity's toll, equilibrium's return. Subterranean truth, portal flung ajar to unready realms. We loitered in limbo, directionless. Mark's return sundered the stasis. Satchel discarded at threshold, peck bestowed. Routine right. Oblivious to vocal strain, my downcast gaze, Ethan's reticence at board. unheeding my recoil at inadvertent graze. I cataloged totality. Ethan's hush, his exodus at my ingress, mealtime monosyllables, device's shield. Withdrawal entrenched. I frayed it seems. Thorax constricted perpetual acoustics, creak, murmur, stride, twisting viscera. Catastrophe loomed, revelation via errant dispatch, telltale tableau, tonal slip. Ethan's candor, youth's impunity. My edifice teetered. Vigilance consumed, device scoured for relics, effacing ephemera, digital detritus vaporized. Nocturnes beside Mark, rigid as flotsam, his perusal of dispatches blind to my implosion. Interrogation looped, disclosure imminent? From him, me? Guilt throbbed metronomic terror its counterpoint. Transgression absolute, carnal, irrevocable. Fragility pervaded, union, hearth, psyche. Jitters reigned, ire ignited at trifles, unrinsed mugs, tardy returns, unanswered rings. Erstwhile tolerances now tempests, verity's gag unyielding. I entwined with your kin's blood and self-eludes, unutterable. Thus, ingestion, interment, suppuration, Ethan, circumspect detachment, vestiges of affinity entombed. Proximity's bridge crumbled. Retribution perhaps merited. Agony's zenith, not the act, but its echo. Hush's hegemony, gulf's growth, anticipation's vice. Awaiting verity's pursuit, fracture's harbinger, eternity's pretense, or perdition's plunge. Days blurred. I halted in the corridor, transfixed by a framed mosaic from a bygone clan retreat at the Headlands Inn. Smiles frozen in sepia, arms entwined, briny gusts tousling tresses. Ethan, diminutive then, 8 perhaps, beside me, cherubic with wind-kissed cheeks, clutching my hem like talisman. Auntie, he'd piped in treble tones, demanding tales of merfolk while I wove kelp crowns for his brow, enduring paternal tisks till dusk. Then he was ward, kin to safeguard, innocent, unmarred. Collapse followed, frame cradled as foundations quaked, ignominies flood, remorse's riptide, bewilderment's breakers. Alienation engulfed, the portrait's poise, the credo of confines and credence forsaken. Craving communion, not carnality. Affinity, not anarchy's vortex that racked slumbers and jolted at chimes. Perhaps conflation in desolation, warmth's flicker fanned to conflagration. Raising the bastion of self duskward, I unearthed a ledger in the alcove. Lamplight low, drapes sealing twilight's gaze, and inscribed, not indictment precisely. Genesis, epistle to Ethan. Midway, pivot to Mark. Denouement, soliloquy to mirror's tenant. Inked the shroud of obscurity, the thirst for affirmation, culpability's creep into sinew, the enigma of yielding sans rationale. Lamented tactile void, not flesh alone, but essence's embrace. Queries on diurnal drifts, regard as entity, not echo. Unsealed, unaddressed, it nested amid a tome of coastal lore, archival shroud. For valor falters? Those syllables may languish veiled. From Ethan, Mark, perchance my recurrent perusal. Contemplation veered to candor, unfurl to Mark, hazard havoc's harvest. Catharsis or cataclysm, mending or maiming. Enigma endures. Soul certainty, taciturnity's tonnage mounts. Antecedent self recedes to horizon's haze. Each corridor traverse evokes the mosaic. Does Ethan evade, stung his eye? Dialogue on that umbral union? Absent glances null. Cruelty's core, intimacy interred in abyss, as vapor, nullity. Yet palpably etched, ballast perpetual. Transgression's taint indelible. No garlands or alibis cloak it. Yet isolation permeated that hearth. We all meandered, severed, preferring quietude's cloak to verity's blade. No dawn plotted perfidy. It germinated in fissures where ardor atrophied to ash. Now encumbered by this lodestone, arcane erosion, indelible imprint, unrest's riddle. Divulge, unleashing maelstrom's might, courting dissolution? Or cradle covert, preserving remnants scaffold? If shadows converge thus, affection and atonement at odds, hearts whisper, clashing consciences roar, ponder, halting viable? Postlude's utterance? Veracity's vanguard? Or sepulchre's sanctuary, supplication for seclusion? Voices, unvarnished, lacerating, resonate. For fractured verities oft, illuminate deepest. Some ers resound in thunder, rending ties, igniting infernos. Others murmur eternally, companions at feast, nocturnal intruders, silent sentinels in transit. My trajectory with Ethan Mark the self once steadfast? Uncharted fog? Revelation gleams, though. Neglect voids protracted, they plunder plenitude from any fount. Perilous pittance, eventual fracture. Sought sustenance, bartered for beholdenness. Yielded fragment irretrievable, heed if attuned. To the dimming in your sphere, behold, not ocular alone, but visceral. For the obscured oft merit foremost gaze. But let's rewind a touch because the unraveling didn't stop at that hallway vigil. A week later, the cottage felt like a pressure cooker, steam building from every unpurged corner. I caught Ethan on the back steps one morning, staring out at the bay where fishing boats bobbed like forgotten toys. He looked smaller somehow, shoulders hunched against the wind whipping off the water. I hesitated at the door, coffee steaming in my mug, the words I'd rehearsed a dozen times in the mirror low.